Get an MRS degree? That's what conservative media personality Charlie Kirk told a 14-year-old girl recently. All while taking questions from the audience at Turning Point USA's Young Women's Leadership Summit. Kirk, who's 31 years old, had some advice for the youngster aspiring to be a political journalist. Let's listen.
I think there is an argument to bring back the MRS degree. And no, seriously. And just be clear, that's why you're going to college, right? Don't lie to yourself, I'm studying sociology. No, you're not. We know why you're here. And that's okay, actually. And that's a really good reason to go to college, actually, especially an SEC school. You will find a husband.
The so-called MRS degree is a term usually referred to women who attend college to score a husband. Kirk's comments at the conference geared toward young conservative women come on the heels of a cultural revolution of sorts happening on the right, one that prioritizes traditional family values, femininity, faith, and motherhood. A recent Washington Post reporter got a glimpse of that culture shift. Journalist Kara Vaught got a front row, so to speak, at the summit. According to her article, in a sea of pastels, pearls, and beehive buns, there was no talk of politics, just culture. As keynote speaker Alex Clark said, quote, "Less Prozac, more protein, less burnout, more babies, less feminism, and more femininity."
The left reacted strongly to Kirk's message. YouTuber Keith Edwards posted, quote, "Charlie Kirk thinks little girls just want to go to college to find a husband. This clip is so creepy." And journalist Jill Flipovic posted, quote, "This poor girl, she asked Charlie Kirk about her goal to be a political journalist, and he tells her to go get an MRS degree." I feel like, I would agree with some of those comments that we just heard from the left. Look, I felt like it was awkward and it was uncomfortable. She's asking about her dreams. In that moment, I felt like he dimmed her light and was really telling the whole audience that don't worry about your education and your career. This is what you need to do to go to college. And guess what? Charlie Kirk is not going to be there for you if you are in a not so good or abusive marriage or dysfunctional marriage and you have no education and no career and you are financially strained, and that is the number one thing women look at when they're looking to get out. Is he going to save you then? When life happens, if your spouse, God forbid, goes through an accident or cancer or disability, is he going to save you then when you don't have education or career? And I'm not talking about a formal education. There are AI courses, there's tons of ways you can get an education. But the idea that you should just go back to 1960 and be this one thing when you have all of these opportunities around you is horrible advice for men or women.
I consumed a lot of the content from the summit, and I thought it was a lot more nuanced than that. In the beginning part of the comments, which we didn't get to see in that clip there, he asked the audience who in the crowd wants to prioritize getting married and having a family. And he points out then that one of the ways to do that, if that's your priority, is to find a husband while you're in college, which I think is actually pretty sound advice, right?
You can find like-minded men or women in college. Nobody's disagreeing with that, but it's the fact that this young woman asked you about being a political journalist. So she didn't ask you about how do I, find a man. She asked you about, what advice would you have about political journalism? And who says you can't have a political, journalism career and still have a family? By the way, we're listening to someone who is a community college dropout. He clearly does not value education. He had the benefit of having a wealth benefactor for his organization, and most people won't get that opportunity. So he's speaking from a very point of view that I think is very privileged. While there may have been nuances to your point of what happened leading up to the conference, this young woman's question was very direct, and I think he gave her horrible advice.
I don't know if I agree with that, but I think on the point about Charlie Kirk being a community college dropout and then achieving, I think that gives him firsthand experience to make the point that you don't have to go to college to be successful. And I think that's a very actually good point, because we've seen in this country that more people than ever are going to college, and yet wages haven't increased. A lot of people are not working. There's a huge drop in the labor force participation rate, which I mentioned earlier in the show. And meanwhile, there's a lot of job openings in blue-collar work. College is not for everybody, and I think we made a mistake in the late 90s to early 2000s by telling people that that was the only path to success. And I don't necessarily blame parents or even educators for sending that message, because obviously you want your kids to do better than you, right? And it was believed at the time that the way to do that was to have your kid go get a college degree. But a college degree has been so devalued now because everyone has one. It's effectively the equivalent of a high school education if you're going into white-collar work. So I do think that there's a huge opportunity for people to go back to trade schools or continuing education, or even get jobs straight out of high school. So I don't have a fundamental problem with telling people that college isn't always the answer for how to have a successful life.
Totally. I think that there's many ways, especially now, where you can get courses and learn about what's happening right now. We know many women who are stay-at-home moms who have phenomenal careers on platforms like TikTok, on platforms like Instagram. They are finding a way to become their own economic engines. So I think that there's many ways, and that required some learning, right? And also, I think this is an important thread. Where did we, get to the belief system that education for the woman or the man, the husband or the wife or partner, or whatever it might be, is not good for the child to also see? It's important for children to see growth. It's important for, I think, them to see that you want to learn. But again, be it a course, it doesn't have to be a 4-year degree. But to tell a young girl, it's just so disheartening for her to say vulnerably what she wants to do and him say to reconsider this MRS degree. And I go back to the limitations that he's placing on young women and men who decide to pursue education. So I think it's just a disservice all around. And to your point earlier, that I will say that related to his specific situation, not everyone has that enormous amount of privilege to have somebody literally support your organization from a wealth perspective. Most do not. Most do not. And I think that we're sending the wrong message if we think that, you're going to be okay. The statistics show that even though the bachelor's degree might not have the same value it did 30 years ago, you are over time going to make more money in your lifetime than you would if you just had a high school diploma. Unless you're Charlie Kirk and you get that money behind you for an organization.
I wouldn't describe it as privilege. He was an entrepreneur. He came up with a great idea and was able to convince people to invest in his business idea, which to me is not privilege but hard work. And I do think that, money's not the only form of success. And I think what he's trying to intone to these young women is that if you really value family and taking care of your kids, and maybe you want to be a stay-at-home mom one day, you're going to have to make sacrifices. And I appreciated what Brett Cooper said on the stage at this Young Women's Leadership Summit. She's a very popular podcaster. She pointed out that there is a lot of nuance to these discussions. And the point is not to say that women can't have a career or can't aspire to a career, but that there's going to be trade-offs that you make. You can't do it all. And
at the same time, especially, I would agree with that point.
Sure, yeah. And Alex Clark often points to a lot of data that's come out over the past 20 years that shows that children who don't have a parent in the home with them tend to fare worse in mental health, attachment disorders, and other issues than kids who do have a parent in the home. And so they're approaching from this angle of what's best for raising a healthy and successful and supporting your family. And those are hard conversations, and it's not always what people want to hear. But I think it is sort of trying to bring this back to reality. And if you want to be a wife and a mother and you want to be able to support your family in the best way that you possibly can, sometimes you do have to pull back from a career and make those hard choices.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's a balancing act to all of it. Absolutely. Well, next up, Republicans, they're not too happy about President Trump extending the TikTok ban deadline. We'll have more coming up.